Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a famously tricky accounting scenario. It's one of those mathematical puzzles that, looks incredibly straightforward on the surface, but it actually hides these complex traps that can completely distort a balance sheet if you aren't paying close attention. We're talking about consignment stock valuation, specifically the precise, honestly kind of headache-inducing calculations required when a single shipment is hit by both normal and abnormal losses at the exact same time. It's a true dual loss dilemma. And it's exactly the kind of granular accounting mechanic that keeps inventory managers and corporate auditors up at night meticulously double-charting their spreadsheets.
So, our source poses a really direct fundamental question to get us started. What procedure is followed for the valuation of closing stock when abnormal and normal losses occur simultaneously? I mean, we already know how to handle these two types of losses in a vacuum, right? But when they strike the very same consignment, they interact in a highly specific, mathematically intricate way. Our source points out that while the abnormal loss itself is calculated as usual, it's the valuation of the remaining closing stock that really demands our intense, special attention. We have to methodically untangle them to ensure our final inventory numbers are actually grounded in financial reality, rather than just some convenient accounting fiction.
To untangle this mess, our source outlines a rigid, sequential, 5-step procedure. Step 1. Calculate the initial total cost. Step 2. Adjust for the abnormal loss. Step 3. Adjust for the normal loss. 4. Ascertain the new cost per unit. And finally, Step 5. Determine the closing stock value. Think of this process exactly like peeling a mathematical onion, layer by layer. We have to establish the total base right at the start, and then we carefully strip away the specific layers of loss, using very distinct rules for each, until we reach that pure, accurate value right at the center.
Okay, step 1 builds our foundation. Before we can even think about deducting any losses, we need to know the absolute maximum size of our cost pool. So, to calculate the initial total cost, you naturally take the base cost of the goods consigned. But crucially, you do not stop there. You have to add all non-recurring expenses incurred by both the consignor, the one who originally sent the goods, and the consignee who ultimately received them. Now, why is that addition absolutely essential? Because things like cross-country freight, transit insurance premiums, initial unloading warehouse fees, those intrinsically add to the total sunk investment of getting that inventory from point A to its final saleable location. All of those initial non-repeating costs, regardless of who actually paid them out of pocket, get bundled together to form our massive starting number.
Moving on to step 2, peeling away the bad layer, the abnormal loss. With our massive total cost pool totally established, we immediately have to extract the disaster from the equation. The abnormal loss is your warehouse fire, the organized theft, the unexpected, catastrophic damage in transit. Because this kind of loss falls completely outside the realm of standard, expected business operations, the accounting rules require us to strip this disaster out of our consignment entirely. We're essentially forced to treat it as if it never even belonged in this specific calculation in the first place, completely isolating its financial impact from the surviving goods.
The directive here for making that adjustment is absolute. You must deduct the physical quantity, and you must deduct its proportionate cost. Let's ground this abstract rule in a quick mental example, shall we? Imagine you shipped 100 premium crates of electronics, and 10 of those crates completely burned up in a warehouse fire. First, you physically subtract those 10 ruined units from your total physical count. Then, you subtract the exact dollar amount it took to buy and ship those specific 10 crates from that massive initial cost pool we just built in step 1. Both the physical units and their associated financial weight are cleanly, proportionally severed from our running totals. It's a strict one-to-one extraction that leaves our remaining pool perfectly balanced. And that brings us to step 3, the normal loss trap. Once the disaster is cleanly removed, we walk right into the absolute most dangerous part of the calculation. Seriously, if you're going to make a crucial balance sheet breaking error in this entire procedure, human nature dictates it's going to happen right here. Why? Simply because the logical rules of extraction we just used are about to fundamentally flip on their head. Think about it. We just deducted both quantity and cost for the abnormal loss, right? Well, the trap is assuming you automatically do the exact same thing for the normal loss. The expected, unavoidable transit realities like fluid evaporation, standard agricultural spoilage, or minor leakage. But our source is incredibly explicit on how these differ. For normal loss, you deduct the quantity from your physical inventory, but you make absolutely zero adjustment to the cost. Let me repeat that, because it is literally the linchpin of this entire calculation. You do not touch the remaining cost pool. The physical units evaporate or spoil, meaning they are physically gone from the warehouse floor, but their financial weight remains fully behind. It doesn't just disappear from the ledger, it gets completely absorbed.
And this trap perfectly sets up step 4, ascertaining the true cost per unit. To find this critical number, you divide your remaining cost pool, which, remember, is the cost strictly after deducting the abnormal disaster, by the total number of good units you actually have left to sell. Because the normal loss reduced our physical inventory but left the financial cost entirely untouched, the mathematical reality shifts dramatically here. Your denominator shrinks, but your numerator stays exactly the same. Consequently, the cost per unit for your surviving inventory actually inflates. Those surviving, pristine units are now quite literally carrying the financial burden of the expected shrinkage. Every single remaining good unit just became slightly more expensive to hold on the books.
Which brings us right to the finish line, step 5. The source gives a very simple directive here to determine the closing stock value. You finally multiply the number of unsold units by the cost per unit obtained in the 4th step. Now, it's a basic multiplication to find your final stock value, sure, but think about what that final cost per unit actually represents. It is a highly engineered, deeply nuanced number. It carries the complete history of your initial freight and insurance investments, the total excision of an abnormal warehouse disaster, and the quiet, hidden absorption of your normal, expected transit losses. It's not just a simple price tag on a spreadsheet. It is the entire mathematical story of that specific consignment. So we've successfully peeled the onion and found our true value, but I really want to leave you with this to ponder. We just saw how meticulously you have to treat cost and quantity depending on the specific nature of a loss. If ignoring the normal loss trap distorts your final unit cost by just a few fractions of a cent, what happens to a massive global company's bottom line when that microscopic error compounds across millions of units and thousands of consignments, year after year? A tiny misunderstanding of normal versus abnormal loss can bloat inventory values and artificially inflate profits, leading to totally disastrous corporate audits down the road. The rules of valuation aren't just abstract math, folks. They dictate real financial reality. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and remember to always keep questioning the math behind the numbers.